What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we're going to look at rethinking warm-ups, and I want to talk a small bit about the warm-up before, whether you go to the gym or you go and play your sport, a field sport, or if you're going for a run. And the same principles are going to apply to everything here. So I guess I'm going to use the idea of a field sport because it's probably the most chaotic version of it, and then you can take that and you can apply it to everything else that you do before, okay? Because when we're looking at warm-ups, we're always looking at this idea of moving from control to chaos. And when you're looking at a team sport or a field sport, or even if you're looking at a one-to-one combat sport where you're involved with somebody else, there are a lot more unpredictable factors. And when you have these variables in place, you need to be a bit smarter about how you approach your warm-up. Now, the majority of people are probably going through their warm-up perfectly and there's no issue. But in this podcast, I want to maybe highlight a few other things that you can do that will also help with you improving your performance, reducing your risk of injury, and then getting into the game and enjoying it a bit more. So it's we're going to look at what you can do before you get there. Then we're going to look at what you can do when you get there as well. Okay. So to kick it off, when you're looking at a warm-up, it's always about using this idea of Kaizen, what works for you, and then taking that, doubling down on it, and getting rid of the stuff that doesn't work for you. And this is something that I talk about a lot in the Back to Exercise group, is that with the people who are in there, we're always trying to figure out what is the most effective thing for them specifically. And I give them all the education and I give them the mobility and the movement and the exercises around it. But once they find something that works, we double down on it. We don't continue pushing levers or pushing the buttons of things that don't work, because there's no point working on those if they're going to waste time. We're trying to make everything as efficient as possible. And I think your warm-up should be the same way. It should be efficient, effective, and it should be succinct. That you get through everything and that once you're finished, you're ready to go. So to get into it, I'm going to try and make it a short enough podcast so people can apply this or take it and listen to it twice if you need to. But when you are going down to play a sport, you should often consider the sport a couple of hours before. And what I mean by that is that before you actually get to the pitch or before you get to the running track, you should have a few things done that will help you just get into the flow of your warm-up so you can get straight into the sport. This is something that I always apply myself, and it's something I apply with all my clients because it makes such a difference, because you're mentally prepared, which is something that I will talk about, that a lot of people probably don't prep as much for that, but you're mentally prepared, and then you are that bit more physically prepared, and you have a better you feel yourself a bit more, and you feel your body a bit more. And it doesn't mean that you have to go through anything too crazy or anything that's out of this world. It just means that if you're at home, you would be working through a couple of mobility exercises that help you feel a bit better. Now, for me, if I knew I was going out and playing, let's say if it was GAA I was playing and I had a football match, I would try at home to knock out a couple of thoracic rotations, maybe a couple of full body mobility exercises, and then isolate the hips, isolate the knees, isolate the ankles a little bit more. Now, that sounds like I'm probably taking half an hour or 40 minutes, but really it's not. Really it's just 3 to 4 exercises that I feel work really well, and I can do them at home, and that once I am done, I just feel that much better. And I'm going to be always stiff and sore for the first one, but then as I loosen into it, or as I kind of loosen up, it becomes much, much easier. And I think many people miss out on that little gap that you have at home where you can go through a few exercises. The same thing is that when you do these exercises, if you focus on your breathing, it helps you to relax overall. So especially if you have a game on, it can kind of bring you into yourself, and it'll make you that much more mentally clear before you go there. But we don't do it. I think we just wait till we get there, and then we get straight into it with the team or the people that we're playing with, or with the group that we're with. So that's the first one I say, is that when you are at home, just try to take 3 to 4 minutes to go through a couple of exercises. It'll mentally prep you, and it'll physically make you feel that much better. Now, to add to the physical side of things, what we often miss out on as well is general movements. And anyone who listens to this podcast, anyone who has worked with me, knows that I'm a stickler for trying to get people to do more general movements throughout the day. And there's so much to be gained from it. What is a general movement? Well, simply it's walking around, making sure that you're not just sitting all day, getting up, sitting in your car, and then getting into training. Then just trying to get a bit more activity during the day, where you're playful with your movements, you're messing around, you're swinging out your legs, you're touching your toes, you're swinging out your arms, you're doing rotations, you're kind of checking and prepping older injuries or older issues that you had. So if you have a knee issue, you might be doing a couple of mini lunges throughout the day just to get that warmed up and get it activating. If you find that your back is always tight, you could be just doing a few more rotations, upper body rotations, where you're just literally just looking over your shoulder. And when you start to include more of these throughout the day, you notice that you're a lot more alert when you get to the session. Because if we're just sitting down all day, we pop up, get in the car and go to the session, you're going to be groggy, you're going to be lethargic, you're going to be slow to get going. So these little general movements and kind of general activities throughout the day where you're playing, and I'm huge on play, where it's like just focus on doing little movements that are enjoyable to do. And you'll find that you'll be a lot less lethargic and you're going to be a lot more ready to go. And the warm-ups, and you don't feel as stiff. Everything improves when you do these a bit more. Now, if you're looking at something a bit more specific and performance-based, you can include this idea of PAP, where it's post-activation potentiation. And this is more for as I said, it's more of a performance-based thing. But you can include it in all your sessions if it's something that you want to get better at doing. And all we're doing here is we're including some form of explosive exercise within the couple of hours before our session, so that when we get there, neurologically we're a lot more prepped and we're a lot more alert, and then we can be a lot more explosive and reactive then within the game that we play, or within the activity that we do. And for people like who are asking what is PAP or what does it look like, as I said, it's any type of explosive exercise. If you have access to a gym and you can go in and you can do like a back squat, perfect, and then you might after back squat do a broad jump. Now, you wouldn't be going in and knocking out 10 reps. You'd just be going in and doing like 2 to 3 reps and seeing how that feels. Then at the other side, you might do like 1 to 2 broad jumps and see how that feels. And it's about mixing between the two of them and making sure that you're not fatiguing yourself. It's literally just for the alertness and the reactiveness and the explosiveness of it. So that's a simple one. What also works for people is like a ball slam or a ball throw, jumping lunges, burpees if nothing else works. And if you are that way inclined, squats, deadlifts, lateral hops, triple hops, anything like that, where this works really, really well for field sports, but it also works well for if you have in a sport that is explosive. If you're going for a 5k run, you may not need this as much, but if you're going to be going in wrestling, doing jiu-jitsu, if you're going to be going in and let's say playing football, playing soccer, playing rugby, anything like that, even tennis, I could see, like anything that's going to have explosive movements involved in it, this can really, really help. And you, as I said, go in 2 to 3 sets, relatively heavy weight if you have the opportunity to do it, and you go through it, and then you go to the explosive right after, where it's a weighted squat jump can be a nice one for people, and as I said, ball slams, ball throws, and just 5 to 6, nothing crazy. Just trying, when you are doing it though, the intention is to do it as maximal as possible. Now, you're obviously going to have a little bit of a warm-up done. You're not going to go in and do a maximal broad jump having no warm-up done, and you're not going to do a maximal squat having no warm-up done. Then again, the squat doesn't actually have to be that maximal. It just has to be like between 60 to 80% of your 1 rep max, I think is what it is. So it's just making sure that you go through it, and then it really does come back to the intention when you're looking at PAP. It really comes back to the idea of, in your head, you have the idea that you're doing it as explosive as possible. Now, when you actually get there to the area of competition, or your local club, or your tatami, or wherever you are going to be arriving, your running track or the gym, you repeat a similar process. You go through the light mobility stuff. You start with the general movements to make sure that everything is moving nicely. You play around a small bit, push around your friends, kind of get yourself prepped in that way. But then what I think more people can do that they don't do, and this is something that I have introduced and I found it to be extremely effective with clients, especially ones who are playing at a high level, is when you get there, try to take 3 to 5 minutes where you're sitting alone and just focusing on your breathing. And it can be, what I find is the easiest for most people is that box breathing, where you're inhaling for 5 seconds, you're holding for 5, you're exhaling for 5, and then you're holding for 5 again. And I find that it's a really simple way of centering people, and they can do it before training, or they can do it before a match, whatever it is. As long as you just take the time to center yourself, focus on your breathing for 3 to 5 minutes, 5 minutes ideally. The other thing with this one is try to do it in a place that you're not going to get disturbed. I say to people, go into the bathroom, go into a cubicle in the bathroom. It's not the nicest for the first 30 seconds because you're inhaling and exhaling through your nose, but otherwise, once you actually get into the swing of it, it's much easier, and it's very relaxing. But it's a great way of centering yourself, clearing your mind, and getting yourself prepped for this session, or getting yourself prepped for the game that you're about to play. Now, this one itself, obviously, it's going to work for you if you do it in the moment, but the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I would say to introduce it into your training sessions more, and then try to do it in your before a match. Like a simple, can you bring your focus to your breathing? 5 by 5 by 5 by 5. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. And the hold is as important as the inhale or exhale. And then get out and try to get back into it. But it is a very, very effective method. The other one then is, I would say, when you're looking at the movements, start to think a bit more full body. Before, you might be doing those playful movements where you're touching your toes, or you're pushing off people, or you're rotating and stuff like that. Now you might be a bit more isolated on your general movements. While you're talking to someone, you're rolling out your neck and you're looking left to right. I don't mean foam rolling, I mean just like doing neck rotations. And you're looking left to right. Then you start to bring in your shoulders into it. Bring one shoulder at a time, double them up. Try to do a couple of tasks where you're like maybe throwing a ball off a wall and catching it. And then you include the upper limb. And then you're starting to move down into your thoracic, your lumbar, your hips, and your lower limb. Now you can combine them all together, but just make sure that you're touching off all of them when you do it. Now you can do this before or after the breathing. It doesn't make a huge difference. Before the breathing, you're going to feel like when you get out of the breathing that you can get back onto there, you can get straight into your activity. If you do it after the breathing, you're going to feel every area that bit more. You're going to feel it like you're going to have a lot more, I guess, conscious awareness of each of the areas because you're going to be relaxed. So it really depends on what works for you. Now when we talk about actually getting into the sport, we're looking at building, and you may have heard me mention this at the start, from the idea of control to chaos. Okay, and this is really important because when you're competing, it's a chaotic environment generally because you can't control the variables that are going on around you. But when you're warming up, you can control those variables to an extent. So you should have a nice mix of control variables, and then you start to move into more chaotic environments. And what that means is that you could start doing, if you're going out and you're going to play a football match, you could be in the dressing room or on the pitch doing nice jumps left to right and landing, where you're just jump, land, stick it for a couple of seconds, jump, land, stick it for a couple of seconds, feel it out, feel out your feet, feel out your ankles, feel out your knees, see how it is, and then go for a couple of reps of that. Now, to make that more chaotic, what you would do is you close your eyes and you do the same thing, where you jump left to right, eyes closed, and you're landing, feeling it, landing, feeling it. That's the next thing that you do then. For people who are getting into the sport, you look at then jogging is obviously the controlled, sprinting is a bit more chaotic, add accelerations and decelerations to it, add cuts, backpedaling, add somebody that they have to react to, then it becomes a lot more chaotic. One that I think that needs to be introduced in contact sports more, and I think it would work in nearly every sport that you're going to be against somebody, is some form of wrestling or some form of contact where you're working through nice easy movements at the start, trying to put the other person off balance, and then you're getting a bit more into it. Like you'd start at like a 30 to 40% and you'd build it up to a 60 to 70%. If it's not your main sport, if your main thing isn't wrestling or jiu-jitsu, you probably don't want to go at 100% here because you don't want to get anyone injured before. But it can be a really effective way of kind of improving your body awareness before you get onto the pitch. And I think it's missed in a lot of GA teams is that idea of wrestling. A really simple one is have someone lie on the ground and try hold them down. it's like two people, one is on the ground, the other one's on top of them, try hold them down. Another one could be that you're just up and you're trying to get double underhooks, like where you're trying to get two hands underneath and you're pushing each other by. Or you could have two cones set out, and from each end, and one person has to try to get past the other person, while the attacker can do whatever he wants, cuts and all that, while the defender can only keep his hands open and can only kind of direct him. So that you have all these different levels to it, and they all make a big difference depending on what you're trying to focus on. And then when you push on from that, you look at doing things that are a bit more sport specific. And sport specific things are obviously the basic ones that you do. There's no point me going into detail on, all right, well, you do running out and hand pass and then doing whatever kicking and stuff like that. It's trying to think yourself, include them yourself, about like, what would you say is the easiest way to go from a controlled to chaotic environment where you have non-contact into contact, and then there's an increasing demand, so increasing tasks each time, because it should be goal orientated, because when you actually get into the game, I think many people focus on primarily the physical side of it, but you forget that there's such a cognitive demand on the game as well. And then obviously the emotional demand on it, where you should be able to control your emotions and hold it. And that comes back to that breathing side, where you're using that to focus in on it, and control everything, and being able to then, when you get into the game or when you get into your training session, perform to the level that you want to. So there should be goal orientated side to it as well. And it could be just one goal at the start where you're saying get from A to B, or it could be you start adding like two goals, get from A to B, and when you get to B, then you have to look and maybe assess the situation and have another task at that point. So it could be, okay, I want you to get this ball, take on the defender, and then once you get past him, you're looking to kick a score. While the start, it could just be get this ball, take on a defender. You know, where you're having this increasing demand, progressive demand, and then you introduce ideas, and the cognitive demand increases each time. So once we start to consider, okay, right, we know that with the physical, it's going to improve. We've already done the general movements. We've already done the isolated proprioceptive stuff to get improve your landing mechanics, to improve or increase your heart rate, to improve your alertness, all of these other factors. Then it's important as well to start to include the cognitive demands. And once you're all ready to go, this is the interesting thing, I think. Once you're ready to go, you're warm. Instead of getting straight into it, I say pull back just for a minute or two and relax. Let everything sink in and settle. And the reason being is the physical is obviously ready and warmed up. But when you pull back, it gives the body a chance to kind of reorganize and to settle itself, for lack of a better phrase. And what that does then is when you actually get into it, you're a lot more zoned in. But I think a lot of people make the mistake of trying to continually increase levels without ever pulling back. And what that does is you kind of get muddled and mixed and confused, and it takes people longer to kind of transition through the phases. And a simple example is, if you think of this outside of sport, if you're trying to play the guitar, let's say you're trying to learn a new song on a guitar, and you just keep forcing and forcing and forcing and forcing and never stop and keep forcing it, at a certain point you're going to get pissed off with it, obviously, but you'll see improvement, but maybe not to the level that you want to. So a little trick, something that I really try to apply to everything now, is push, little pull back, and then go again. And you'll notice after the recovery or the pull back, you'll be way better. So if in the guitar situation, you'd push, get to the point that you're pissed off and annoyed, and then you pull back for a couple of minutes, you go outside, you do something, you come back in and you try it again. And when you try it again, generally, it'll be a lot easier the next time, even if there's only like a 5-minute space in between it. And the reason being is that it gives the nervous system a chance to kind of wire, not that it's going to wire new neurons in that 5-minute space, but to coordinate the neurons that have already been used. It gives it that opportunity to do so. And the pullback and recovery is a simple way of doing that. And you can use this for anything. It's such a powerful tool to use, where you push, pull back a little bit, and then go again. Especially when it comes to things that are involved in neurology, and especially when it comes to skill acquisition. And yeah, so it's a really simple one. You can do it for mobility, where you push to your end, you feel like you can't push anymore, then you stop, you do something else, and you come back and do the same exercise, and you'll notice it'll have improved massively in the short space of time. So it's a little trick. It's one that I wanted to just throw in there as well, because I think it's important for people to start to understand that one and to know it a bit more. I don't think people realize the effectiveness of it. You can try today with something. If you're trying to get something, you're trying to get a task done and you're struggling with it, keep going to the point that, okay, right, I think I've tried everything here. Take a little step back. It's like the idea of sleep on it. Take a little step back and then go back at it again a couple of minutes later. And generally you'll be a lot better equipped the second time round. So the main takeaways are, before you get there, have in mind that you want to have your body moving. So in little simple ways. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It's just simple movements, general movements, things to get it going. You can also look at doing more mobility based movements in that time as well, if you have the time for it. And you might just pick 3 exercises that you can isolate certain areas. Then after that, I say that you want to introduce some form of breathing as a mental task to get everything, to get yourself settled, but also to kind of bring your focus to a certain point. And that will help going on throughout the training session, as it helps for the performance side. Then you're looking at light plyos and jumps right before you get into it. I think these are really important. Look at closing your eyes as you get into it. Now you can also focus on the PAP side of things, post-activation potentiation. But the light plyos and the light jumps are really good for just getting body mechanics right, getting your awareness right, and getting you that bit more alert. Then when you actually get into the session, you're looking at moving from control to a chaotic environment, and you can do that in many ways, and just introducing different variables as you do. Continue to build on the physical and the mental tasks once you're in there, and then once everything has been introduced and ready to go, and you have a better idea of what you're trying to achieve, you pull back and you let it sink in, and you give it a chance to recover just for a couple of minutes before you actually get into the performance completely. But that's everything that I wanted to chat about right now. If you have any questions, shoot them over to me on Instagram. It's at The Mobility Tutor right now, but that will be changing pretty soon, so keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, if you get the opportunity, I'd really, really appreciate. I'm looking to get the podcast up to 1,000 5-star reviews. If you found this interesting, and if you thought that it was, you've learned something, or you took away 1 point from it, I would love if you could rate it on Spotify or iTunes, whichever one you're on. It's generally just at the very top. So if this is the most recent podcast you're listening to, just scroll up to the top. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love if you could rate it there. And then let me know on Instagram if you did so. And I'll make sure to get you back again with something, hopefully in time, or hopefully sooner rather than later, because I do have things in the pipeline. But otherwise, I do appreciate you listening again this week. Thank you for being here. I love the community, the people that listen to the podcast. People are always reaching out, talking to me, letting me know what they think, letting me know their thoughts on different episodes, and it's great because we get a nice dialogue going. So don't ever be afraid to reach out, send any questions that you have, say that, okay, I listened to this, I thought my thoughts were this, and then whatever your thoughts are this, and kind of, there's nothing wrong with a pros and cons, or looking at discussing it more and kind of fleshing it out and seeing where our two opinions match and where they differ. I love that. So I love that side of the discussion. So if that's something you're interested in, definitely reach out to me on Instagram and we can shoot over and back there. Otherwise, I send out about 2 to 3 emails a week now. And the easiest way to get in the email list is if you download the free guide, which is also very, very helpful for people. I have a free guide, Understanding Your Chronic Back Pain. It'll put you in the email list as well. And the emails are kind of keeping people updated on the podcast. But I also, every email is like a little lesson, is what I try to do, like a small lesson, very short, nothing too long, where we focus on different concepts that might work for people in a rehab context, or different concepts that might work in a performance. We look at mindset and changing different mindsets, or reframing and looking at something from a different perspective. So the easiest way to get involved in that is just hit the link in the description, and it'll bring you to the Understanding the Root Cause of Chronic Back Pain, which is my out and out Bible for understanding how it doesn't have to be just back pain, understanding how a chronic injury develops. And we talk about the burn spot, how a burn spot develops on your nervous system. It's not actually the injury itself generally that's causing you pain, it's this burn spot in your nervous system that causes you pain. It is a basis for every single issue that you deal with in terms of pain in your life. So it's definitely worth reading it. It's a short guide and it'll teach you everything about it. So check that out as well. And yeah, that's all. Back Pain Back to Exercise group going to be kicking off again in March, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you all again for listening. Hope everyone is doing well. Please don't forget to rate the podcast. Thank you very much. And I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one.